The 9-year-old girl was crying, begging to sleep with her father. The father sensed something was deeply wrong. That night, he secretly checked his security camera feed and froze in horror. His worst fears had become a reality. Hello, I'm here to help you make more insightful decisions. 5 years had passed, but the old apartment in a quiet suburb of Chicago where I lived with my daughter seemed to operate like a broken clock, always repeating the same day. 5 years was enough time to dull the ache of a failed marriage, but also long enough for loneliness to seep into every corner of our home. My name is Ethan Bennett. I'm an ordinary office worker in my late 30s. My greatest treasure isn't this apartment or my stable job, but my daughter Lily. At 9 years old, she was so good and mature that it often made me feel guilty. Every day I woke up at 5:30 a.m. The first thing I did wasn't wash my face, but peek into my daughter's room. Watching Lily's round face nestled in a soft pillow, breathing steadily in deep sleep, brought me a strange peace, but also a pang in my heart. They say a man builds the house, but a woman makes it a home. In this house, I had to be both. My ex-wife had left in search of a better, more luxurious life, leaving me with our daughter who was only 4 at the time. I tiptoed to the kitchen. Cooking had never been my strong suit, but necessity had turned me into a decent amateur chef. Today's breakfast was her favorite chicken noodle soup. The cheerful bubbling in the pot and the savory aroma of chicken and vegetables filled the small kitchen, chasing away the early morning chill. I carefully skimmed the broth to keep it clear and seasoned it perfectly to Lily's taste. She didn't like food that was too salty. On that point, she was a lot like her mother. At that thought, I sighed softly and shook my head to banish the memories. At 6 sharp, I went to wake Lily. Lily, time to get up. Dad made your favorite soup. When I gently shook her shoulder, Lily mumbled and turned over. She blinked her big round eyes a few times and gave me a sleepy smile. She never whined or cried when I woke her. She was a painfully good child. Knowing how hard I worked, she always tried to do everything herself. Okay, Dad, just 1 more minute and I'll be up. Watching her neatly make her bed, run to the bathroom and brush her teeth, filled me with pride but also a twinge of sadness. Kids her age usually had moms to comb their hair and pick out their clothes in the morning, but here there was only a clumsy dad with rough hands. After breakfast, I took on the task of doing Lily's hair. In the early years, it was the hardest part of my day, but now I'd gotten the hang of it. I gently untangled her hair and wove it into 2 neat braids. Lily's hair was long, dark, and shiny, and it smelled of a delicate, fruity shampoo. Wow, Dad, your braids are even prettier than my braids, Lily complimented me in her clear, sweet voice. Those innocent words melted my heart, and all the world's worries and fatigue seemed to vanish. I kissed her forehead, adjusted the pink ribbon, grabbed her backpack, and we headed out to the car. The morning streets were crowded and noisy. As I drove, Lily sat in the back seat, buckled in securely. We navigated the morning traffic on the way to her school. The elementary school gate was buzzing with life, full of the laughter of students and parents. I pulled up, unbuckled her, and said, as I always did, "Have a great day at school, sweetie. Dad will pick you up this afternoon." "Okay. You be careful on the road too, Dad." Lily waved and ran toward the playground, her large backpack bouncing on her back. Only when she disappeared through the school doors did I feel a sense of relief and head to work. Our life flowed on peacefully. During the day, I was absorbed in my work, pushing myself hard to provide a better life for my daughter. In the afternoon, no matter how busy I was, I always picked Lily up on time. Our dinners were just the 2 of us, but they were never short on laughter. Lily would tell me about school and her friends. Those innocent stories were my most precious treasure. However, late at night when Lily was asleep, I would often sit alone on the balcony, smoking a cigarette and staring at the faint glow of the streetlights. That's when the loneliness would creep in and gnaw at my soul. I worried I couldn't give my daughter all the love she was missing. I worried that as she grew up, she wouldn't learn the gentleness and tenderness that only a mother can teach. I worried about what would happen if I got sick or had to go on a long business trip and she was left alone. My friends and colleagues encouraged me to remarry. They said a man couldn't live alone forever, and more importantly, Lily needed a mother. I thought about it, but the fear of the wicked stepmother trope always held me back. I was afraid a new person wouldn't love Lily, that my daughter would be hurt again. One day, a sudden summer rainstorm seemed to bring a new turn to our lives. It was my longtime friend Mark's birthday. Mark insisted I come, and of course I had to bring Lily along. The party was at Mark's house, cozy and not too loud. Among the familiar faces, I noticed a new one. It was a gentle-looking woman in a modest blue dress, sitting in a corner of the room cutting up fruit for the children. That was Sarah. The moment I saw the delicate way she wiped ice cream from a child's mouth, I saw a rare gentleness in her eyes. My numb heart suddenly started to beat faster. I didn't know then that this fleeting infatuation was the beginning of a tragedy I would regret for the rest of my life. The birthday party was in full swing, the clinking of glasses mixed with the laughter of children. The host and unwitting matchmaker Mark led me over to where Sarah was sitting. "Ethan, this is Sarah, my wife's cousin. She's a preschool teacher. A really wonderful person. And Sarah, this is the famous golden single dad I've told you so much about, Ethan Bennett." I nodded a hello. Lily, shy in the new environment, clung tightly to my leg. Sarah looked up. Her smile was as gentle as an autumn breeze. Without any awkwardness or hesitation, she looked at me, then her gaze fell on Lily. A warm sympathy filled her eyes. "Hello, Mr. Bennett." "Hi, sweetie, what's your name?" Sarah's voice was warm and pleasant. Lily answered softly, "Lily." "Lily, what a beautiful name. I have some delicious strawberries here. Would you like to try some?" Sarah held out a plate of neatly sliced strawberries to Lily. The little girl looked at me as if asking for permission, and I nodded. Lily let go of my hand and approached Sarah. I watched as Sarah not only gave her the plate but also pulled out a chair for her and asked her tenderly about school. The way she talked to children was so natural. There was no fakeness, no trying to please the adults. Perhaps because she was a teacher, she understood children's hearts better than anyone. It made a very good first impression on me. That evening, I had many opportunities to talk with Sarah. She was 3 years younger than me and was still single after a painful breakup. She spoke with wit and wisdom, and most importantly, she knew how to listen. We talked about work and life, and the main topic, of course, was children. I really love children. When I see them laugh and play, life just seems lighter. "Unfortunately, I haven't had the chance to be a mother yet," Sarah said with a wistful look, gazing out the window at the children playing tag. Those words and her sad expression touched my heart. I saw in Sarah a woman who longed for a warm family home. I thought she might be the one who could bring warmth to my cold house. From that day on, we kept in touch. Short texts asking how we were doing turned into long, deep phone conversations every night. Sarah would often bake delicious cakes or make jams and send them over. Sometimes it was a box of butter cookies. Other times a jar of refreshing applesauce. Lily grew very fond of Sarah, too. She said Aunt Sarah's treats were delicious and praised the beautiful braids she did for her on every visit. I started to dream of a future with a new family. I imagined Sarah picking Lily up from school, the three of us sitting down to a warm dinner. My heart, which had been parched by long years of loneliness, became like dry earth after a rain, and the seeds of love quickly sprouted. I believed Sarah was the missing piece of the puzzle that heaven had sent us just a little late. In the 3rd month of our relationship, I decided to propose. It was a cool autumn evening in Chicago. We were walking through Lincoln Park. "Miss Sarah, aren't you afraid of the role of a stepmother?" I asked directly. In my situation, honesty was the most important thing. Sarah stopped and looked me straight in the eye. In the lamplight, her eyes shone. "I'm not afraid of being a stepmother. I'm only afraid of not being a good enough mother to deserve a child's love. If you and Lily will have me, I would like to take care of you both for the rest of my life." Sarah's answer moved me deeply. I took her small, warm hand. I believed Sarah. I believed everything I had seen for the past 3 months, her tenderness toward Lily, her care for me. I considered myself the luckiest man in the world to have met such a wonderful woman, but I was wrong. As they say, the human heart is an abyss. The gentle, wise image Sarah projected was just a perfect mask hiding a dark interior. And the first victim of my blind faith, the one who would be hurt the most, was my little girl whom I loved more than life itself. When I introduced Sarah to my parents, they all praised my choice. My mother, who had always worried about me raising a child alone, held Sarah's hand with tears in her eyes, begging her to treat Lily like her own daughter. Sarah dutifully replied, promising she would. Our whole family was fooled by her sweet smile. There was only one last, most important hurdle left: Lily. Although Sarah had visited us many times and Lily seemed to like her, I had to ask my daughter directly for her opinion on my remarrying. I didn't want her to feel pushed aside or forced to accept a stranger as a family member. I needed her sincere consent, so I planned an outing for just the two of us to have a serious talk. I never dreamed that this conversation would be the beginning of the painful days to come for my daughter. That weekend was sunny. Golden, dazzling sunlight fell on the old trees. I took Lily to our favorite ice cream parlor downtown. The place was full of our memories. The shop was crowded and filled with laughter, but my heart was strangely anxious. We sat at a corner table with a view of the street. I ordered a chocolate sundae for Lily and an iced coffee for myself. Lily ate her ice cream with relish, her face adorably smeared with chocolate. I wiped her mouth with a napkin and took a deep breath to gather my courage. Lily, Dad wants to ask you something. I began trying to sound as casual as possible. Lily stopped eating her ice cream and looked at me with her round eyes. The absolute trust in her gaze made my heart ache. Lily, what do you think of Aunt Sarah? Does she treat you well? Lily tilted her head, thinking for a moment, then nodded. Yeah, Aunt Sarah is nice. She buys me yummy cookies and taught me how to fold paper cranes. She has a pretty smile, too. I smiled, feeling relieved. So, if Dad and Aunt Sarah lived together, and I asked her to be Lily's mom, would that be okay with you? My question hung in the air. Lily stopped eating her ice cream and put the small spoon down. She lowered her head and stared at her little hands, beginning to intertwine her fingers, a habit she had when she was thinking deeply. My heart pounded. I was afraid she would object, that she would burst into tears, that she would think Dad didn't love her anymore. The minute felt like an eternity. I was about to open my mouth to say, if you don't want to, Lily, it's okay. Dad will never force you, when she lifted her head. Her eyes were clear, but there was an adult-like quality in them far beyond her 9 years. Dad, if you live with Aunt Sarah, will you be happier? You won't have to smoke cigarettes on the balcony alone anymore. I was stunned. She knew everything. She knew about my sleepless nights, the sighs I tried to suppress. This sensitive little girl had noticed it all. A lump formed in my throat and my eyes welled up. I reached out and took her small hand. Yes. If Aunt Sarah is with us, Dad will have someone to lean on too. So, I'll be happier. But the most important thing is how you feel, Lily. You have to be okay with it. Lily smiled brightly, a smile as radiant as the sun. But for some reason, her eyes looked moist. It's okay with me. I want Dad to be happy. I'd like to have a mom too. Aunt Sarah is a good person. I'm sure she'll be a good mom. Marry her dad. The words marry her dad were as light as a feather but carried the weight of a ton of love. The 9-year-old girl, instead of trying to keep her father's love all to herself, was saying she would share it for his happiness. Emotion choked me. I could only nod and pull my daughter into a tight hug. Thank you, my sweet girl. I promise you, even if someone new comes into our lives, you will always be the most important person in the world to Dad. No one will ever take your place in my heart. Lily buried her face in my chest and hugged my neck tightly. I know, Dad. I believed then that my daughter's consent had opened the door to happiness for us. I never dreamed that this innocent gesture was pushing my daughter straight into a tiger's den. Lily's innocence and devotion had unwittingly given the devil a chance to enter our home. If she had shaken her head that day, if she had been just a little more selfish, perhaps the tragedy would never have happened. But in life, there are no ifs. After getting Lily's consent, everything moved quickly. I proposed to Sarah, and she immediately accepted. We began planning the wedding. Since it was my second marriage, I didn't want a big celebration. We opted for a small, intimate reception with close family and friends. Sarah was also very understanding, not demanding expensive gifts or a lavish venue. She said all that mattered was that we loved each other and would spend the rest of our lives together. Her words made me appreciate and trust her even more. During the wedding preparations, Sarah came to our house more and more often. She started rearranging things and buying new home goods. She spent a lot of time with Lily, even buying her a new dress for our wedding. Seeing the two of them laughing and picking out the dress filled my heart with extraordinary warmth. The image of the happy family I had so longed for was slowly becoming a reality. I remember that afternoon very clearly. After shopping, Sarah brought Lily home. The child, dressed in a pink princess dress, twirled proudly in front of me. Dad, am I pretty? Mom picked it out for me. The word mom came out of her mouth so naturally without any hesitation. I looked at Sarah and she smiled gently, her eyes shining with joy. In my heart, I thanked heaven for taking pity on us and sending such a wonderful woman into our lives. But I didn't know what schemes lay behind that sweet smile. I didn't know that this beautiful dress was just bait, a colorful wrapper meant to hide the cracks that would soon appear in our home. Lily's innocence and my trust left us defenseless against the claws of a wolf in sheep's clothing. The wedding took place on an early winter day. The wind was cold, but people's hearts were warm and full of joy. Our apartment had been spruced up. Dressed in a dark suit, holding Sarah's hand in her modest red dress, I entered the house. Lily walked behind us, holding the bride's veil, her face beaming with joy. After a simple ceremony at the courthouse, Sarah officially became my wife, Lily's stepmother, and the new mistress of this house. On our wedding night, after all the guests had left the house, returned to its initial quiet, but it no longer had that old emptiness. Sarah removed her makeup, changed into comfortable pajamas, and rolled up her sleeves to cook her first dinner as my wife. Seeing her bustling around the kitchen filled my heart with a profound sense of peace. I leaned against the doorframe, just watching my wife, feeling like I was in a dream. "Why are you staring at me like that? Go play with Lily." "Dinner will be ready soon," Sarah turned, and smiled, beads of sweat on her forehead. I walked over and wiped them away with a napkin. Who else would I look at but my wife? "Thank you for being with us, Sarah." Embarrassed, she gently pushed me away. "Stop it, honey. Lily's watching. Go set the table." That dinner was the best I'd had in 5 years. There were no fancy dishes, just simple chicken cutlets with mashed potatoes and some fresh vegetables. But you could taste the flavor of family in that food. Lily ate a lot and kept complimenting. "Mom's cooking is so much better than Dad's." When I pretended to be hurt, laughter filled our home. Our honeymoon wasn't a luxurious trip abroad, but days spent together in our little nest. Sarah took a week off work to organize the house and take care of us. She rearranged my closet carefully, ironing every shirt. She bought new chrysanthemum pots for the balcony and a new bedding set with cartoon characters for Lily's room. Everything in the house became brighter and more organized under her touch. In the mornings, I no longer had to wake up early and rush to make breakfast. Sarah would be up first preparing a hot meal. All I had to do was brush my teeth, wash my face, and sit at the table. Thanks to Sarah, Lily's hair was now always neatly styled and tied back. "Eat up, you two, or you'll be late for work and school." "Bacon and cheese omelets today." Sarah's cheerful, bustling voice sounded so domestic. Lily and I looked at each other and smiled, digging into the delicious omelets. The feeling of someone taking care of my meals and my sleep was wonderful. I resolved to work even harder and love Sarah even more in return for her sincerity. Lily also grew very attached to Sarah. Coming home from school, she would nestle up to her new mom and tell her everything that had happened. Sarah would listen patiently, sometimes teaching her what was right and wrong. One time, I saw Sarah helping Lily with her homework, patiently explaining a difficult math problem. Seeing that, I felt complete peace and could focus on my work, entrusting my daughter to my wife. However, the happiness didn't last long. Once the honeymoon period ended and life returned to its hectic routine, cracks began to appear. At first, they were very small changes, so small that an unobservant man like me couldn't notice them. Sarah started complaining that Lily was messy in her room. "Honey, Lily is a big girl now, but she still throws her toys everywhere. I'm constantly cleaning up after her." I replied with a smile, not thinking much of it. "All kids are like that. She's still little. You just have to be patient and explain it to her." Sarah said nothing more, but her face showed a hint of displeasure. I dismissed it as a minor daily issue. Then, at some point, Lily's laughter disappeared from the dinner table. The child no longer chattered away as before. She would keep her head down, finish her meal quickly, and then immediately go to her room to do her homework. "Why has Lily been so quiet lately?" I asked Sarah curiously. Sarah, washing the dishes, answered casually. "She probably has exams coming up and needs to focus. Besides, I've been teaching her that she's a big girl now, so she should be quiet and not talk while eating. It's not polite." Hearing that, I nodded. I thought Sarah was raising the child well. Good table manners are important. I didn't know that behind that silence, fear was growing in my little girl's heart. I never dreamed that the rules Sarah set weren't to educate the child, but to stifle her spirit so she couldn't complain to me. Such silent changes were happening every day, every hour, chipping away at my daughter's joy and innocence. And I, her father, was still living in the illusion of a perfect, happy family. 3 months had passed since Sarah became my wife. 3 months isn't a long time, but it was enough to completely upset the established order of our family. On the surface, everything seemed stable. The food was still tasty, the soup was hot, and the house was clean. However, the atmosphere at home was becoming heavier and more oppressive each day. I noticed a clear change in Lily. She no longer ran to greet me when I came home from work. Instead, she would shut herself in her room. When I entered, she would jump in fright, quickly closing her book or hiding something. "Lily, what are you doing in here that you didn't even hear Dad come in?" I asked, trying to sound cheerful. Lily, with her head down, fiddled with the hem of her shirt and answered in a low voice, "I was just doing my homework." I looked around the room. Everything was excessively tidy. The toys were neatly stacked in a box, the teddy bear sat upright on the shelf, and the comforter was folded with military precision. This pedantic order made the child's room feel cold, lacking the charming messiness typical of kids' rooms. It's good that you're diligent with your homework, but you need to rest and play too. How about we go to the park this weekend? No, I don't want to. I have to help Mom around the house. My daughter's answer surprised me. Help around the house, Lily. You're still little. Studying is more important. Mom can handle the cleaning. Mom said I'm a big girl now and I have to learn chores so I can be a good wife someday. Besides, Mom gets tired too, so I want to help her. The child's words sounded very reasonable and mature, but for some reason, there was no joy in her eyes. Her gaze, full of resignation, avoided mine. I patted her head, a seed of doubt sprouting in my heart. It's nice of you to think of Mom, but don't overwork yourself. I left her room and went to the living room to talk to Sarah. Sarah was watching TV. When she saw me, she smiled brightly. What were you and Lily talking about? I feel like she's been too quiet lately. She says she has to help around the house. Don't make her do too much. She's only 9. Sarah turned off the TV and faced me, her expression serious. Honey, teaching her chores from a young age is for her own good. You spoil her too much and it's making her lazy. If a grown girl doesn't know how to wash dishes or clean, who will want her later? I only give her small things to do, like wiping the table or folding her own clothes. Sarah's voice was gentle but firm, and her logic was so clear that I couldn't argue. I let it go with a grunt. I figured women had their own ways of raising children, and as a man, I shouldn't interfere. However, Lily's strange behaviors increased. Once I saw her come home from school with a large bruise on her forearm. When I asked in alarm, she said she had fallen off her bike. Another day, I noticed her eyes were swollen as if she'd been crying. She said she got dust in her eye. Most unsettling was Lily's attitude toward Sarah. In my presence, she would always say politely, "Yes, Mom." But whenever Sarah looked at her, I saw the child's body flinch, and her gaze drop to the floor. There was a great deal of fear in it. One evening at dinner, Lily accidentally dropped her spoon on the floor. The sharp clatter of metal on tile echoed in the silence. Lily's face turned pale, and she scrambled to pick up the spoon, apologizing profusely. "I'm sorry, Mom. It was an accident. I didn't mean to." Her over-the-top reaction startled me. Was dropping a spoon a reason for such fear? I looked at Sarah. She was eating calmly, merely remarking lightly, "Be more careful next time. You can't be so clumsy." It was an ordinary phrase, not a shout or a scolding, but for some reason, a chill ran down my spine. And the look Sarah gave Lily in that moment, it was just for a second, but I caught a glimpse of an icy, emotionless stare completely different from the gentleness she usually showed. That night, lying next to Sarah, I couldn't sleep. My fatherly intuition whispered to me that something was wrong in this house. The image of my daughter trembling as she picked up the spoon, her fearful, evasive gaze, and the bruise from falling off her bike wouldn't leave me in peace. Was I being too suspicious? Was Sarah really, as she said, just being strict for the child's own good? Or perhaps behind closed doors when I wasn't there were terrible things happening that I had no idea about? I turned over. Sarah was sleeping soundly, breathing evenly. Her sleeping face still looked so gentle. I calmed myself down. I was probably just being too sensitive. Sarah loved me and our family. She wouldn't harm Lily. But the unease in my heart continued to grow like a silent cancer heralding the arrival of a storm that would shatter the false peace of this home. That weekend in Chicago, it had been raining since morning. The sound of drops hitting the roof of the neighboring building was a monotonous, sad melody. The house where laughter had recently faded felt even emptier. I sat in the living room reading the newspaper, but my eyes kept drifting toward Lily's room. The door, as usual, was tightly shut. It was already 10 a.m., and she still hadn't come out. This was completely unlike her old, lively, early-rising self. I put down the paper and decided to check on her. I knocked 3 times, but there was no answer. I carefully turned the handle and went in. Lily was sitting huddled in the corner of her bed. In her hands, she clutched an old teddy bear, a memento from her real mother. Her eyes were fixed on the window, watching the raindrops streak down the glass, her face a mask of unimaginable sadness. "Sweetie, why are you sitting alone in the dark?" As I flicked on the light, the room brightened, but even the light couldn't dispel the gloom on the child's young face. Lily jumped startled and quickly wiped away the not-quite-dry tear tracks on her cheeks. "Dad, I was just watching the rain." I walked over to the bed and sat beside her. I gently brushed the hair from her forehead. Looking at her swollen eyes, my heart broke. It was clear she had been crying for a long time. "Lily, look at Dad. Did something happen? Why have you been so sad lately? Is someone bullying you at school?" I asked hurriedly, filled with concern. Lily kept her head down, wringing her hands, and said nothing. Her silence weighed heavily on my heart. I lifted her chin, forcing her to look me in the eye. "Tell Dad. I'm your father. Whatever it is, Dad will take care of it." "Are you sick, maybe?" Lily just kept shaking her head, avoiding my gaze. No, Dad. I'm just a little tired. That's not it. I've raised you for 9 years. You think I don't know when you're happy and when you're sad. Don't hide anything. Maybe you're feeling lonely. I tried to guess the cause. Suddenly, a thought occurred to me. Maybe she was going through a phase with psychological issues she found hard to talk about with her father. After all, I was a man, and there were some things a girl might find difficult to confide in me. I sighed, took her hand, and said in a softer voice, "If it's hard to tell, Dad, maybe you could talk to Aunt Sarah. She's a woman too, and your mom. I'm sure she'll understand and help you. It's easier for women to talk to each other." The moment I finished speaking, I felt the small hand in mine flinch. It was a very subtle reaction, but it was enough to make me notice something was wrong. I waited for her to nod or agree. However, her next reaction completely shocked me and left me utterly bewildered. As soon as the name Aunt Sarah left my lips, Lily jerked as if she'd been hit with an electric shock. Her sad face immediately turned deathly pale, and she bit her lips so hard it nearly bled. She pulled her hand away from mine and scrambled to the far corner of the bed, hugging her knees to her chest in an instinctive defensive posture. "I won't talk to her, I don't need to." Lily's voice was hoarse and filled with a fear I had never seen in her before. Her eyes widened, and she glanced nervously toward the door, as if afraid someone was listening. Then she looked back at me pleadingly. "Lily, what's wrong? Aunt Sarah loves you. She does all this for your own good." I tried to calm her, but the more I spoke, the more violently Lily shook her head. Tears streamed from her eyes, running down her cheeks. "Everything's fine, Dad. Please just don't tell her anything. Promise you won't tell her I was crying." Lily grabbed my shirt, her small hand trembling as it clenched the fabric. I was stunned. Why was she so afraid of Sarah finding out she had cried? Was crying a crime? A 9-year-old girl had the right to cry and be sad. Why did she have to be so terrified? Calm down. "Why can't I tell her? She's your mom, after all." I pressed, full of suspicion. Lily didn't answer. She glanced at the door again and whispered in a very low voice, "Please, Dad, don't ask anymore. I'll be good now. I'll never cry again. Please don't call her." Every one of her actions, every word was so clearly marked by fear that it sent a shiver down my spine. I remembered how Lily flinched at the sound of Sarah's voice, how she quickly lowered her head whenever Sarah appeared. All the scattered pieces suddenly began to fit together, forming a terrifying picture I didn't want to believe. "Did Aunt Sarah do something to you?" I asked, my voice trembling. Lily opened her mouth to say something, but at that moment her gaze shot past my shoulder toward the door. Her pupils dilated and her whole body went rigid as stone. I turned my head in the direction she was looking. The door was already open. Sarah stood there. In her hand was a plate of cut fruit, and on her face was her usual radiant smile, but her eyes were strangely cold. "What secrets are you two whispering about? Maybe Mom can join in." Sarah's voice was sweet and honeyed, but in this quiet, fear-filled space it sounded like a hidden threat. I clearly felt Lily's hand fall limply from my shirt. The child lowered her head and her whole body trembled. Sarah walked slowly and gracefully into the room, placed the fruit plate on Lily's desk, and came over to the bed. She sat down across from Lily next to me. The heavy scent of her perfume overpowered the damp smell of the rainy day, but I only felt a suffocating heaviness. "What happened, sweetie? Why are your eyes so red? Did Dad yell at you?" Sarah reached out to pat Lily's head. Lily instinctively turned her head, avoiding the touch. Sarah's hand hung in the air for a moment, then she very quickly changed its direction and placed it on Lily's shoulder, squeezing lightly. I saw Lily's shoulders tense, but the child couldn't escape. "I was just sad, Mom," Lily answered in a barely audible voice. "I was thinking about my real mom." I knew she was lying. Her real mother had been gone for 5 years. She sometimes talked about her, but she never cried so desperately. And in this situation, that excuse seemed very forced. Sarah sighed, putting on a look of false sympathy. "My poor baby, I understand. No matter how hard I try, I can never replace your real mom. She's probably just growing up and getting more sensitive. That's why she's so sad, honey." Sarah turned her head and looked at me, her eyes moist as if filled with tears. She was playing the role of the magnanimous stepmother, enduring her stepdaughter's coldness perfectly. Before, I would have been moved and felt guilty. But today, after witnessing Lily's extreme terror, Sarah's words sounded hollow and calculated. "There's something off with her. Whenever I mention you, she tries to avoid the subject," I said casually, watching their reactions. Sarah smiled faintly, still gripping Lily's shoulder tightly. "All kids are like that." She was probably afraid to say she missed her real mom because she didn't want to hurt my feelings. "Here, eat some fruit and cheer up. Lily, be a good girl. Eat this piece of apple." Sarah picked up an apple slice and held it to Lily's mouth. The child stared at the apple as if it were poison, but under Sarah's firm grip and piercing gaze, she opened her mouth and took a small bite. She chewed it with difficulty and swallowed hastily, as if wanting to end the torture as quickly as possible. Good girl. Honey, let's let her rest now. We'll go out and give her some space. Mom will come help you with your homework later, Lily. Sarah's last sentence, Mom will come help you with your homework later, sounded so gentle. But I saw Lily flinch. Her hands clenched the bedspread so tightly her knuckles turned white. I stood up, bewildered. I wanted to stay with the child, but I was afraid of offending Sarah with baseless suspicions. Besides, I needed time to observe the situation and rethink everything calmly. I walked out of the room behind Sarah, but before closing the door, I glanced back. Lily was still sitting huddled in the same spot, looking at me with a desperate expression that seemed to say, "Dad, don't go. Don't leave me alone with her." The door closed, cutting me off from my daughter's terrifying world. With a heavy heart, I walked to the living room. The good mom, good daughter act that had just played out was so perfect it was suspicious, and I had a feeling tonight was going to be a very long night. That evening passed in a heavy atmosphere. Dinner was over quickly. Lily ate very little and said she was going to her room early. Sarah still behaved attentively, serving me food and telling funny stories from her preschool. I answered in monosyllables, my thoughts circling my daughter's room. Around 9 p.m., Sarah went to take a shower. The sound of running water came from the bathroom. I was watching the news in the living room when suddenly Lily's bedroom door burst open. The child ran out barefoot and headed straight for me. Lily threw herself into my arms and hugged my neck tightly. Her breathing was shallow. Her whole body was cold as ice and trembling violently. "Dad! Dad!" she cried in a hoarse, terrified voice. I quickly hugged her back, stroking her trembling back. "Dad's here. Calm down." "What happened, sweetie? Did you have a bad dream?" Lily shook her head violently, tears soaking my shoulder. The child looked up at me with swollen eyes, extreme despair on her face. "Dad, can I sleep with you tonight, please? I don't want to sleep alone." The child's plea sounded desperate. It wasn't the voice of a whining child. It was the cry of a drowning person clinging to a piece of driftwood. She hadn't asked to sleep with me since she was 6. She had always been proud of being a big girl with her own room and bed. And today, abandoning all her independence, she was begging me for a place to sleep. "Why do you suddenly want to sleep with Dad? You're a big girl now, it'll be crowded," I asked, trying to find out the real reason. Lily pressed herself against me even tighter, her nails digging into my skin until it hurt. "I'm really scared, Dad. I'm scared of the dark. I'm scared to sleep alone. I can sleep on the floor. I'll be quiet in a corner. I promise I won't bother you. Scared of sleeping alone. Are you afraid someone will come into your room?" At my question, Lily froze for a moment. The child didn't answer. She just buried her face in my chest and sobbed as if a long-suppressed sorrow had finally burst. The sobs were choked. I glanced at the clock. The water was still running in the bathroom. Sarah hadn't come out yet. This was the only chance for the child to talk to me without being watched. But at that moment, I, the stubborn, rigid father, failed to see this distress signal. I just thought the child was being weak and needed firm guidance. I didn't know that my stubbornness was pushing my daughter to the edge of a cliff. I gently pried Lily's hands from my neck and put my hands on her shoulders. With a stern look, I looked her straight in the eye. "Lily, listen to Dad. You're 9 years old now. You're in the 4th grade. You're not a 3-year-old. You have to learn to overcome your fear." Lily looked at me with disbelief and disappointment. Stammering, she tried to convince me. "But Dad, just for tonight, please." "No. If I say yes tonight, you'll ask again tomorrow. Bad habits are easy to form. You have to be brave. Dad is right in the next room. If you call, I'll hear you right away." I refused, firmly believing I was teaching her a lesson in growing up. I thought giving in to these baseless fears would make her weak and dependent. I wanted my daughter to be strong like a cactus in the desert, not a flower in a greenhouse. Lily stood in the middle of the living room, her arms hanging limply. The fluorescent light cast an eerie shadow on her tear-stained face. The child looked at me, no longer pleading in her eyes, but despair and resignation. "Dad doesn't love me anymore. Dad only listens to Aunt Sarah." My daughter's words stabbed my heart like a dagger. I wanted to explain that I was doing this because I loved her for her own good. But before I could speak, the bathroom door clicked open. Sarah came out, a towel wrapped around her head, her skin flushed from the hot water. Lily jumped in fright and turned to face Sarah. The fear swept over her again, much worse than before. The child took a few steps back, keeping her distance from both of us. What's going on? Are you whining to sleep with Dad again? Sarah asked as she towel-dried her hair. Her voice was calm, as if she had expected this. She glanced at Lily. Under Sarah's sharp gaze, the child trembled. No, I'm going to my room now, Lily said hastily. She turned and fled to her room, slamming the door behind her. The sharp click of the lock echoed. I stood there, staring at the closed door, a vague regret stirring in my heart. See, I told you. She's always whining. If you give in, she'll walk all over you. You have to be strict. Sarah walked past me, patting my shoulder lightly in approval. I nodded, but the certainty in my heart was gone. The image of a trembling Lily, her eyes full of despair, kept replaying in my mind. Was I too harsh? Was her fear really just about the dark? That night I listened for any sound from the next room. I heard no crying, no strange noises. There was only silence, but that silence worried me more than ever. I decided that tomorrow I would find out the truth no matter what. I couldn't let my daughter live in such fear, and the long-forgotten security camera I had installed in the corner of the living room suddenly became my only hope. That night was an eternity for me. The rain outside had stopped, but a storm was brewing in my heart. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Beside me, Sarah slept soundly, her breathing even, but her peaceful sleep felt unsettling and alien. Lily's swollen eyes, her trembling hands clinging to my shirt, the image was seared into my mind and I couldn't shake it. I got up quietly and tiptoed out of the bedroom. The wall clock read 2 a.m. The entire house was plunged into a silent darkness with only the sharp ticking of the second hand. I stood in front of Lily's bedroom door, wanting to open it and check on her. But my hand froze in midair. If I went in now, I might wake her. Worse, if Sarah woke up and saw me secretly checking on my daughter, what would she think? Cowardice and hesitation paralyzed me again. I pressed my ear to the door, trying to hear anything from inside. There was no crying, not even the steady breathing of a sleeping child. The absolute silence was burning a hole inside me. I felt like a terrible father. Why hadn't I believed her? Why had I been so swayed by Sarah's sweet words? I went back to the living room and sat on the sofa in the same spot where Lily had begged me just hours before. My gaze accidentally fell on the small security camera mounted on the wall in the corner near the TV stand. The small red LED blinking in the dark looked like a third eye piercing my conscience. I had installed that camera 3 years ago. Back then, Lily was small, and I often had to go on business trips and wanted to see her. However, after marrying Sarah, I had almost forgotten about it. I trusted Sarah, completely believing she would take good care of Lily, so I never thought to check on them. A thought hit me like a ton of bricks. The camera could store the last week's worth of data. If something had been happening at home when I wasn't there, it must have been recorded. Why hadn't I thought of this sooner? The truth was on that small memory card, and here I was just guessing. I shot up from the sofa. I brought a stepladder and was about to take the camera down, but I stopped myself. If I took it down now, the noise might wake Sarah. She would ask what I was doing, and how would I explain? If I said I suspected her and the truth turned out to be different, what would happen to our marriage? Trust once lost is hard to regain. I decided to wait until morning. Tomorrow was Monday. I would leave for work as usual. Sarah would stay home and I, pretending to go to the office, would go to a coffee shop near the house and check the camera feed on my phone. The camera app was still on my phone. I just hadn't opened it in a long time. I went back to bed and tried to close my eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. I lay next to the woman I had trusted and loved so much, but now I felt a huge, invisible wall growing between us. I remembered the hard look Sarah had given Lily yesterday. It wasn't the look of a mother, not even a stepmother. It was the look of a predator on its prey, full of menace and oppression. What was Lily hiding from me? Why was she so afraid? The questions spun in my head, tormenting me until the first rays of dawn crept through the curtains. A night of torment passed, heralding the arrival of Judgment Day. The next morning I woke up earlier than usual. After a sleepless night, my head was heavy, but my mind was strangely clear. I went to the kitchen and started making breakfast, trying to act normal. Sarah woke up a little later. She stretched and came out of the bedroom looking refreshed, as if last night had never happened. "Good morning, honey. You're up early today. Let me do that. You get some rest." Sarah came over and tried to kiss me, but I skillfully avoided it by pretending to grab an apron. "No, I'm almost done. Go wake up, Lily." Sarah, not noticing the change in my demeanor, cheerfully went to Lily's room. I held my breath and listened. There was a knock then, Sarah's voice calling Lily. The voice was so sweet it gave me chills. "Sweetie, wake up for school. The sun's already up." After a moment, the door opened and Lily came out. She was already dressed in her school uniform. Her face was pale, her eyes were still swollen, and under them were dark circles. Seeing a child so worn out after just one night made my heart ache with pain. Lily went into the bathroom without a word, not looking at me or Sarah. Breakfast was eaten in a grim silence. Lily picked at a few bites of her eggs, put down her fork, and said she wasn't hungry. I wanted to force her to eat, but seeing her tired face, I gave up. I'll drive her to school today. I have something to take care of this afternoon, so I'll be home late. Could you pick her up? I said, glancing at Sarah. She immediately nodded. Of course you focus on work. I'll take care of things at home this afternoon. I'll pick Lily up and make her favorite beef stew. Sarah smiled at Lily. That fake smile now seemed disgusting to me. Lily, with her head down, answered softly. Okay, and got up to get her backpack. I took her to school. We didn't exchange a word the entire drive. When we got to the school gate, I grabbed her hand and looked deep into her eyes. Lily, I'm sorry about last night. I promise everything is going to be okay. Do you trust? Dad. Lily looked up at me. Surprise flickered in her eyes for a moment, but then she looked down again. She gave a slight nod and without a word turned and walked into the school. The sight of her small, lonely figure on the crowded playground hurt my heart deeply. I knew the child was losing faith in me, and I had to act immediately to win it back. Instead of going to work, I drove to a quiet coffee shop about a mile from my house. I chose a corner table, ordered an iced coffee, and with trembling hands took out my phone. My palms were sweaty and my heart was racing. I took a deep breath and opened the camera app. The word "connecting" appeared on the screen. The few seconds of waiting felt like an eternity. Finally, a clear image of our living room appeared. Sarah was at home sitting on the sofa scrolling through her phone. Her relaxed posture was completely different from the busy act she put on when I was around. I started to scroll through the recordings stored on the memory card. I randomly selected a date from last week when I was on a business trip to Denver. I was gone for 3 days, and Sarah was alone with Lily. When the recording loaded and the image appeared on the screen, I almost dropped my phone. I couldn't believe my eyes. What was happening on the small screen was not the tender stepmother-stepdaughter picture I had imagined. It was a terrifying, cruel, and heartbreaking horror show. In the recording, Sarah was not the gentle, dutiful woman I knew. She was sitting on the sofa, one leg crossed over the other, eating sunflower seeds and spitting the shells onto the floor. Next to her, Lily was struggling to mop the floor. The child was mopping very carefully, but wherever she had just cleaned, Sarah would pointedly spit more shells. Wipe that again. What kind of job is this? Are your eyes on your feet? Sarah yelled. Her voice was completely different from her usual sweet tone. It was shrill. If I see a single speck of dust, I'll kill you. As she said this, Sarah kicked the bucket of water standing nearby. Dirty water splashed everywhere, soaking the freshly cleaned floor and Lily. The child shrank back in fear, tears welling up in her eyes as she looked at her soiled clothes. What are you crying for? Putting on a show for your dad again? Listen up, your dad isn't here? I'm the boss here. You'd better watch yourself. I was frozen, blood boiling inside me. How could the woman I called my wife, the one I had entrusted my daughter to say such vulgar, cruel things? But that wasn't the end. The real nightmare was just beginning. I kept scrolling. That evening, Lily was doing her homework at the table. Sarah walked by, glanced at her notebook, and suddenly snatched it and threw it on the floor. What is this handwriting? You write like a pig. Do it over right now. Lily, terrified, picked up the notebook and said through tears, but my teacher said it was good. How dare you talk back to me? Do it over like I said. You think your dad will protect you. Listen here. Your father only listens to me now. If you complain, I'll tell your dad to send you to Child Protective Services. I'll turn you into a beggar on the street. As she spoke, Sarah poked Lily's forehead hard with her finger, causing the child's head to snap back. Lily burst into sobs, but she couldn't cry out loud, only whimpered. With a trembling hand, she picked up her pen and started rewriting the assignment, tears dripping onto the paper. In the coffee shop, I bit my lip until I tasted blood to keep from screaming. So that's why Lily was so afraid. That's why she couldn't tell me the truth. Sarah had planted the fear of abandonment, the fear of CPS in the child's mind. She had used my trust to isolate the child and turn her into a slave in her own home. I kept scrolling, my hands shaking so badly I could barely control the screen. I scrolled to yesterday, to the time I had stepped out to run some errands. Around 10 a.m., Sarah was hanging laundry on the balcony. Lily came over to help and accidentally dropped a clothes hanger. Sarah whipped around her face, a mask of murderous fury. She picked up the metal hanger from the floor and without a word started hitting Lily hard with it. You're useless. You can't even hang clothes right. The sound of the hanger hitting flesh was audible. Lily cowered, trying to cover her arms, but Sarah didn't stop. She beat her on the back, on her bottom, on her thighs. Mercilessly. Lily cried out, begging, "Mom, I'm sorry, I won't do it again, please forgive me." "Shut up, the neighbors will hear you, then you'll really be in for it," Sarah snarled. Lily quickly covered her mouth, stifling her sobs, her body shaking spasmodically with pain. Sarah, after venting her anger, threw the hanger on the floor and pointed at the child. "Wash all of this again, by hand. Don't even think about using the washing machine. If it's not clean, you're not eating today." I slammed my head against the table. Hot tears streamed down my face. I was a monster. My daughter was being so cruelly abused in my own home, and I knew nothing. I even scolded her for not being independent and forced her to befriend this witch. I had helped the devil abuse my own child. Regret like 1,000 needles stabbed my heart, and the pain was suffocating. I thought Sarah's cruelty had already crossed the line of humanity, but the little camera had not yet revealed all its terrible secrets. I switched to another recording from the third day of my business trip in the afternoon. The doorbell rang, and Sarah, with unusual excitement, went to open it. An unfamiliar man entered, tall, thin, with gold-rimmed glasses. As soon as he saw Sarah, he pulled her into a hug and started groping her vulgarly right there in the living room. "Hey, baby, miss me, your idiot husband is on a business trip, I assume," the man asked in a sleazy voice. Sarah giggled and playfully slapped his chest. "He's gone for 3 days. You can do whatever you want, my love." The two lovers kissed, oblivious to Lily watching from a cracked open door. Lily, terrified by what she saw, tried to retreat to her room but was spotted. "Oh, the kid in this house is kinda cute. Come here, Uncle wants to talk to you." The man let go of Sarah and walked toward Lily. Sarah, instead of stopping him, crossed her arms and lifted her chin. "Say hi to Uncle Paul." "What are you lurking for, you brat?" Lily, terrified, shook her head and backed away. The man strode over, grabbed her by the wrist, and forcibly dragged her into the living room. "What are you scared of? Uncle's not gonna eat you. Come here and serve Uncle and your mom. You'll get a treat." They forced Lily to pour them water and massage the man's arms. The man, while enjoying the service, made vulgar comments about me and the house. "Nice place. You could get a lot of money for it. When are you planning to convince him to sign it over to you?" the man, Paul, asked Sarah. Sarah, peeling fruit, grimaced. "Be patient. That Ethan is smarter than he looks. He doesn't trust me completely yet. It'll take a little more time. I'll get him to sign the papers one way or another. Then the world is ours." Hearing this, a chill spread through my entire body. Sarah hadn't married me for love, but for my assets. She had a detailed plan from the beginning, and this lover was her accomplice. They were treating me like a puppet, and my daughter like an obstacle to be removed or tormented. In the recording, when Lily accidentally spilled some water on the table, the man with the glasses slapped her hard across the face. "Are you blind? You can't even pour water." Lily fell to the floor, holding her cheek and crying silently. Sarah, seeing this instead of defending her, nodded in agreement. "She needs to be taught a lesson, honey. This kid is very stubborn. You can discipline her however you want. Just don't hit her on the face or hands where it shows. If Ethan comes back and notices something, there'll be trouble. Hit her on the back or her butt. No one will see under her clothes." Sarah's words struck me like lightning. Hit her on the back or her butt to hide the marks. Her cruelty was beyond human imagination. Not only did she beat my daughter, but she also taught her lover how to do it without leaving evidence. That's why I had never seen any injuries on the child's body. That's why she always wore long sleeves and was afraid when I tried to touch her. I couldn't watch anymore. The phone in my hand felt red hot, perhaps from the fire of rage burning in my heart. I closed the app, threw some cash on the table with a shaking hand, and without waiting for change ran out of the coffee shop like a madman. I had to get home immediately. I had to save my daughter and make those human scumbags pay for their crimes. I drove home like a maniac. I had only one thought in my mind: Lily is at school. I have to get her first, check the injuries on her body, and secure the evidence. I can't let this go. I need solid proof to put those devils in jail. I drove to the school and told the teacher that due to a family emergency, I needed to take Lily out of class. The teacher, seeing my menacing expression and bloodshot eyes, was concerned but allowed me to take the child. When Lily came out of the classroom, she was surprised and scared to see me, probably thinking I had come to scold her. "Dad, you came to get me?" Lily asked cautiously. Without a word, I nodded, scooped her up in my arms, and put her in the car. I didn't drive straight home but to the nearest hospital. I needed a medical expert's report. At the hospital, when the doctor asked Lily to take off her clothes for the examination, she refused vehemently. The child cowered, clutching her clothes tightly and looking at me with pleading eyes. I won't take them off. There's nothing wrong, Dad. Let's go home. Lily was crying and begging. Heartbroken, I hugged her and whispered in her ear, Lily, Dad knows everything. I know Aunt Sarah hit you. I'm so sorry. Let the doctor check you. This way, Dad can fight for justice for you. I promise no one will ever hurt you again. Hearing the words Aunt Sarah hit you, Lily froze. She looked up at me and tears poured from her eyes like a broken dam. All the suppressed sadness and pain burst out at once. The child let go of her clothes and quietly allowed me and the doctor to remove her sweat-drenched uniform. When the clothes were removed, a dead silence fell over the room. The doctor, the nurse, and I were all speechless. On my daughter's small white back, a web of red and blue bruises crisscrossed. Some wounds were already healing, some were still fresh, and some blackened bruises overlapped. It looked like a net, woven from injustice. My God, what happened? Who could do something so cruel? The nurse covered her mouth in horror. The doctor shook his head, sighed, and began to photograph and document the injuries. Every wound was like a knife cut to my heart. I looked at the child who was sobbing with her face in the pillow, her small body trembling. I hated myself. I hated myself so much I wanted to hit myself. What had I done? I had let the devil into my house and driven my daughter to this state. After the examination, I held the child in my arms and kissed her damp hair. Dad made a mistake, Lily. Dad made a mistake. I'm 1,000 times sorry. Lily wrapped her arms around my neck. In her cries, there was no longer fear but trust and reliance. Dad, don't leave me again. Throw her out. I'm so scared. I promise I'll throw her out today. Now let's go home. I took the medical report and saved the painful photos on my phone. Now I had solid evidence in my hands, the camera footage and the medical report. Sarah and her lover could no longer deny it. On the way home, I stopped at the police station and filed a report. I showed the officers the footage and Lily's medical report. The police, seeing the evidence, were also outraged by the cruel act of child abuse. They immediately sent 2 officers with me to the house. I told Lily to wait at the station for her safety, but she insisted on coming with me. I want to see Dad throw her out. I'm not scared anymore. Dad will protect me. The child's determination moved me and filled me with pride. She wanted to see the end of this nightmare with her own eyes. I agreed, but told her to stay behind me and the officers. When we got to the apartment door, I took a deep breath to calm my rising anger. I unlocked the door and went in. Laughter was coming from the bedroom. Sarah was home, and apparently so was her lover. Heaven was on my side. I could catch the pair red-handed. I signaled for the 2 officers to hide on either side of the doorway, and I walked straight to the bedroom. The sight that greeted me made the blood rush to my head. Sarah and the man with the glasses were kissing in broad daylight in my bed. When the door flew open, they both jumped in fright. Sarah screamed and scrambled to cover herself with the comforter. The man panicked, looking for his clothes. Honey, what are you doing here at this hour? Aren't you at work? Sarah stammered, her face as white as a sheet. She looked at me, then at Lily standing behind me, and a look of absolute terror crossed her face. I stood in the doorway like a statue, staring at the 2 scumbags with a gaze burning with rage. I threw the photos of Lily's injuries and the camera's memory card onto the bed. Look, you dogs, look what you've done to my daughter, Sarah. Seeing the photos went pale. She knew everything was exposed, but her cunning nature was still at work. She tried to deny it. Honey, let me explain. It's not what you think. I just wanted to discipline her a little. She was being so naughty, I accidentally got carried away. Got carried away. You got carried away and put the child in this state. You got carried away and brought a strange man into my house. You've been cheating on me and abusing my daughter together, I roared. I lunged forward and slapped Sarah hard across the face. It was a blow that carried all my accumulated anger and regret. Sarah fell onto the bed, covering her face, and started to cry. The lover, seeing this, rushed to defend her, but was met with a kick from me that sent him rolling onto the floor. How dare you make a scene here? At that moment, the 2 police officers entered. At the sight of the police uniforms, Sarah and her lover started trembling like leaves, their faces turning ashen. Please get dressed and come with us to the station. We have sufficient evidence of assault and child abuse. Please come with us immediately. The officer's firm voice was like a death sentence for the 2 criminals. Sarah fell to her knees at my feet, crying and begging. Honey, I made a mistake. Please forgive me just this once. It's all my fault. Think of the marriage we had, please. Marriage. How dare you say that word? You're a beast, not a human being. I will never forgive you. Get out of my sight. I pushed Sarah's hand away and looked at her with contempt. At that moment, I felt nothing for this woman but extreme disgust. At the police station, faced with the irrefutable evidence from the camera, Sarah and her lover Paul had to hang their heads and confess their guilt. Paul testified that he was Sarah's ex-lover, and they had been meeting secretly even before she married me. Their plan was for Sarah to marry me, win my trust, then take my assets, divorce me, and split the money. The abuse of Lily was a result of Sarah's hatred for her stepdaughter and a way to vent her frustration while also intimidating the child into silence. Listening to their clear confession, I shivered, thinking about how evil the human heart could be. I thought I was bringing a sheltering vine into my home, but instead I had brought in a venomous viper. I looked at Sarah, huddled in the corner of the interrogation room. Her hair was a mess, and the face she had once taken such care of was gone. She didn't dare to look up at me. After finishing the paperwork, I went home to pack Sarah's things. I didn't want a single one of her belongings left in our house. I pulled out her clothes, cosmetics, and shoes, stuffed them all into large black trash bags, and threw them into the hallway. When the police were taking Paul away, Sarah, taking advantage of the confusion, asked for permission to grab some personal items. She was still under the illusion that her tears could move my heart one last time. "Ethan, if you throw me out, where will I live? Please just let me stay one night. I'll leave first thing in the morning." I blocked the doorway and handed her the already signed divorce papers. "Sign this and get out of my life. You're leaving with nothing. Besides this trash, you can't take anything. Adulteress. Get ready for prison." Sarah looked at the divorce papers and my firm face. She understood that there was no convincing me and showed her true colors. She stood up, wiped her tears, and said sarcastically, "Fine, let's get a divorce. You think I care about this dump? I'm sick of serving you two. And you little brat, you just wait. I won't let this go." She glared at Lily, who was hiding behind me. When I raised my hand to hit her, she backed away, grabbed the trash bags, and ran down the stairs like a madwoman, her curses echoing in the empty hallway. I slammed the door and double-locked it. A strange silence fell over the house. The storm had passed, leaving only ruins in my heart. But at least the seed of evil had been permanently removed from this nest. The case of Sarah and Paul's child abuse quickly went to court. Given the irrefutable evidence and the severity of the case, organized, prolonged abuse of a child, the court sentenced Sarah to 3 years in prison and Paul to 2. In addition, Sarah had to pay damages for emotional distress and Lily's medical expenses. On the day the verdict was announced, I was in court with Lily. I watched Sarah in the defendant's box, dressed in a black and white striped uniform. Her face was haggard. She looked 10 years older. I felt a sense of bitterness rather than satisfaction. Why would a woman with good looks and a stable job destroy her life over such dark ambitions? If she had had even an ounce of conscience and true love, perhaps we would be a happy family now. Lily held my hand tightly as the verdict was read. The child didn't cry or look afraid. She looked Sarah straight in the eye, her gaze calm but firm. After this ordeal, my daughter had likely matured a great deal. She had learned to face evil and conquer her own fear. After the hearing, I took my daughter to the ice cream parlor where this sad story had begun. "Dad, will Aunt Sarah ever come back?" Lily asked, eating her ice cream with a small spoon. "No. She has to pay for what she did. From now on, it's just the two of us. Dad is never getting married again. I'll spend my whole life taking care of you and making up for the love you missed," I said firmly. I was so hurt by marriage and the human heart that I never wanted to risk my daughter's happiness again. Lily smiled a smile as bright as the sun after a storm. "I don't need a new mom, Dad. I just need you. It's better when it's just us." Hearing my daughter's words, I felt a sense of relief. The psychological burden that had been crushing me for months was completely gone. I stroked her head, feeling a modest but priceless happiness spread through my heart. Our life slowly returned to its normal rhythm. I took a week off work, deep cleaned the house, and repainted the apartment. I threw away everything related to Sarah. I hung new curtains and bought Lily the new pink desk she had been dreaming of. I wanted to erase all traces of that cruel woman to make this house truly our safe haven. Every evening, instead of leaving the child alone with her homework, I sat next to her and helped. I patiently explained difficult math problems, and we practiced her handwriting together. I no longer forced her to do chores, but Lily still voluntarily helped with light tasks, like cleaning or peeling vegetables. She did it now, not out of fear, but with joy and willingness. The wounds on her back slowly healed, leaving only faint scars. Every time I bathed her and saw those scars, my heart still ached. I bought the best scar cream and applied it to her back, hoping that time would heal the painful marks on her skin and in her heart. I spent more time talking with her. On weekends, we went for walks in the park, to the movies, and to the bookstore. Lily's laughter returned the same clear, joyful laugh as before. She chattered about school and her friends again, no longer withdrawn and sullen. One evening, while I was working, Lily ran up from behind and hugged my neck. "Dad, I love you the most in the world." I turned around and hugged her tight. "I love you the most in the world too, my princess." In my warm embrace, Lily fell peacefully asleep. I carried her to bed, tucked her in, and watched her sleeping face. It was calm, and her pursed lips seemed to be dreaming a beautiful dream. In my heart, I thanked heaven for giving me a chance to fix my mistakes and protect this little angel. I knew the road ahead would be long and difficult, and raising a child alone would be hard. But as long as I had my daughter by my side, I would have the strength to overcome anything. 3 years later, time flew by like an arrow. Lily was now 12, a 6th grader. She had grown into a beautiful young girl. She was an excellent student at the top of her class every year. Moreover, Lily was a responsible class representative, loved by teachers and friends. I hadn't changed much. I was still a hardworking single dad. My career was going well. I had been promoted to a manager position. Our financial situation improved, and we were able to buy a new, larger, more comfortable apartment. We decided to sell the old apartment full of both sad and happy memories to start a completely new life. My friends still tried to set me up with different women, but I politely declined. The psychological wounds from my marriage to Sarah were so deep that I couldn't bring myself to trust women again. Besides, I was perfectly content and happy with my life with Lily. I didn't want any more turmoil. One Saturday afternoon, we were doing a big pre-Christmas cleaning together. Lily was humming a tune as she cleaned the windows. Watching my grown-up, hard-working daughter filled me with pride. "Dad, are we going to Grandma and Grandpa's in the country for Christmas this year? I haven't seen them make their apple pie in so long," Lily asked, turning around, her eyes shining. "Of course, sweetie. Dad gets his vacation early this year, so we'll go a few days before and help them clean up." "Yay, awesome." The sight of her joyful smile reminded me of that stormy night 3 years ago when she had trembled and begged me for a place to sleep. If I hadn't realized something was wrong that night, if I hadn't discovered the truth, what would her life be like now? She would probably have become a withdrawn, sad child, or perhaps even worse. The thought sent a shiver down my spine, but I immediately smiled. It was all in the past. The nightmare was over. Now a bright future stretched before us. I would continue to be a solid support for my daughter. We would walk through life together, and I believed that with my limitless love, I could heal all the wounds she had been forced to endure. The terrible secret hidden behind my daughter's plea years ago became a painful life lesson for me. It reminds me that I must always listen, understand, and protect my child with all my heart and all my reason. Because to me, my daughter is the most precious gift in the world and the meaning of my life.